Hello guys, this is Amol Khedkar. I welcome you to this video. This is my second video in the World in 2030 series that I am doing where I am covering all the G20 countries. This will be a video about South Korea and its population paradox. This is an article from the BBC Generation Project and I will discuss what this article says and also my analysis on many different topics of where I see South Korea will stand by 2030. So please don't forget to watch right till the end. And before we get started, also click that subscribe button so that you can get daily updates from my side, and also click on that like and share button as well. So let's get started. South Korea is a really unique country, okay, to be very honest with you, because as you know, Japan was ruling over the entire Korean peninsula after the Second World War, like during the Second World War and even after it for a while. And after that, the Korean War happened in 1950, where United Nations, US, and its allies were on the side of South Korea, and North Korea was supported by China and Russia. Okay, so it was just a proxy war that was fought on the Korean peninsula, and it was just communism versus capitalism proxy thing that was fought. The same thing happened even in Vietnam, in say many countries in Africa as well had the exact same kind of capitalism versus communism fight going on. Okay, so what is happening in South Korea right now is pretty amazing. Okay, with a rapidly aging population, low birth rates, and young people who are increasingly shunning marriage, South Korea is in a population conundrum. Okay, just look at this rapidly aging population. I talked about this in the video about Australia, the first video in this series. So, most of the industrialized countries have a rapidly aging population where they just cannot find a way to reverse that kind of aging. Okay, low birth rates, there are extremely low birth rates, women are just not having children anymore. Okay, and young people who are increasingly shunning marriage, young people don't want to get married. Okay, that's the exact same thing that is happening even in South Korea. Okay, now, look at this. When countries undergo economic change, the effects of the transition aren't only financial, they have major population implications too, right? So, South Korea was a very poor country, okay, by 1950 or 1960, after the Korean War ended. Literally, many of the South Korean people didn't even have food to eat at that time, okay. Right now, they have undergone a very major economic change. So right now, if you look at cities like Seoul, right, or Gangnam area in Seoul, and if you must have heard the song "Open Gangnam Style." Okay, so all those things really point out that South Korea has really undergone a major economic change in the past decades. Okay, there is no doubt about that. But okay, they have major population implications too. Okay, just look at this. It's a very amazing case study about South Korea and how it will look like by 2030. So please listen carefully. Okay, this is very much the case in South Korea, where over the last three generations, the country has evolved like few others due to rapid industrialization, right? So South Korea is one of the four Asian tigers that industrialized in Asia after Japan. So Japan was the very first country to industrialize in Asia, right? Uh, that's why Japan is called the land of the rising sun, right? And after that, four Asian tigers arose after that. So which were the four? South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Singapore. Okay, but South Korea is the largest inland area among all these four countries. That's why South Korea is a part of the G20 countries. Okay, that's why over the last three generations, the country has evolved like few others due to rapid industrialization. So last three generations, in the sense, like if you consider one generation as say 20-25 years, then in the last 75 years, definitely South Korea has evolved like anything. You just cannot debate that. Okay, so today South Korea has a 1.6 trillion dollar economy, the fourth largest in Asia after China, Japan, and India. Okay, so fourth largest economy in Asia after China, Japan, and India. South Korea has such big money on its plate with a relatively less population. Okay, not many people live in South Korea. Okay, most of the population in South Korea lives in cities. Seoul is a very big city. Okay, but the fun fact is that Seoul is also very close by to the border of North Korea. So that's why South Korea has had this kind of perpetual threat of North Korea, and North Korea is a nuclear armed country, right? So that's why they are always living in a sort of fear that maybe a nuclear conflict will start and the Korean peninsula will again just become very very chaotic. And to be honest with you, the Korean war never ended. Okay, so the Korean war was the war that was fought between North and South, right, with different countries supporting different factions in it. But the war never ended. Okay, there was never an official ending of the war. So right now they have the DMZ, the demilitarized zone, that separates North and South Korea. But that's just like a makeshift sort of ending of the war. So the Korean war has never officially ended, and it can just restart anytime. Okay, so that's again a very big threat for South Korea. As South Korea has transformed, so too has its population, and very quickly at that, leaving the country in a true population paradox. Okay, it is undergoing an extreme, rapid example of what demographers call the population demographic transition, a period of population swell, decline, and eventual stabilization that occurs as countries get richer. Okay, so look at this. Population swell, then a decline, and eventually stabilize when the countries start getting richer. Logically speaking, if the countries are getting richer, then they should have more children to, because they can support those children, right? But human mentality really works in a very different fashion. So like what they're saying is that when people get richer, they tend to have less babies, and that's why the fertility rate just goes down. Okay, that's exactly what is happening in South Korea. For South Korea, this means both a large, rapidly aging population as well as low marriage and birth rate that doesn't adequately replace the dying generations. Quite a conundrum for the future of the nation. Okay, very important thing. Like I have made a video about this where I say that Japan is the oldest country in the entire world right now. Okay, so Japan will literally stop existing as a country by the end of this century. And Japan, is a very ethnically homogeneous country. They do not allow foreigners to come into Japan. Okay, so the immigration is just close to nothing in Japan. Okay, same thing with South Korea as well. The Korean language is relatively difficult to learn. Okay, same thing with Japanese language, and that's why South Korea does not allow that many immigrants to come into South Korea. Okay, so again, how are you going to replace your population when your current population is aging and people are not having enough children? What is the other way around it? You tell me, right? There is no other way. You can risk getting completely eliminated from the world stage, okay, as a country, or you can just allow immigrants to come in. These are the only two options. There are no other options. Okay, you cannot literally just have people come out of the sky and start contributing to your economy. And as I've said, why do these countries need immigrants, right? They need them because immigrants pay taxes. Okay, and those taxes are used to fund the social services that are run by these countries. Okay, that's the only reason. Let me be very honest with you, let me be brutally honest with you, that is the only reason why all these so-called developed countries need immigrants, because they just need the tax revenue that they get from these immigrants so that they can keep on funding the social services that most of these citizens enjoy. Okay, so look at this graph now, the shrinking families. Okay, the world's smallest families. South Korea has the lowest fertility rate in the world. Women have an average of 1.1 children each. Okay, so look at this. What this is saying is that from 1960 to 1955, I'll zoom it a bit, and then 2015 to 2020. Okay, this is the entire fertility rate for all these countries. So South Korea's fertility rate was 5.7. Now it's just around 1.1. Okay, look at this. Now 6.1 was for China, and now it is again below 2.1. So 2.1 is the replacement level that is needed for just to replace the population. Okay, not even grow the population, but just to replace the population. Now look at India, right? India has had it was 5.9. Now it is almost 2.2. So India is above the replacement level. So China has already crossed the replacement level. So even China has is looking forward to a demographic decline. So the population will start declining in China by 2030. I will make another video about it where I will analyze the population and the demographics of China. Okay, now look at Egypt, right? Egypt is still 3.3. Indonesia is 2.3, Ethiopia is 4.3. So the future is definitely African and Asian. Look at this, like this just tells you all these things, right? Global average is 2.5. Okay, now Japan is 1.4. Look at Japan, right? Japan is the oldest country in the entire world. USA is 1.8. No wonder why USA needs immigrants. Okay, why is that? Just look at these statistics. Okay, Japan is 1.4. Japan does not allow immigrants to come in. Okay, but the country is now risking just completely being completely eliminated from the world stage by 2100. USA is 1.8. That's why they need immigrants to come into their country, because their fertility rate is lower. Italy is 1.3, so less. Italy does not allow immigrants to come in very easily. Okay, Italy is a southern European country that is not that immigrant friendly. Okay, that's why the fertility rate is just 1.3, and Italy is looking forward to a huge population decline in just a few decades. Nigeria is 5.4. Imagine this. Okay, it's not even close to here. Just look at this. Nigeria is here. It was 6.4 and now it's 5.4. So definitely Africa is going to rule the world in just a few decades. Germany 1.6, UK 1.8, Niger 7.0. Niger 7.0. Imagine this. 7.0. How do you expect that? Now, many of the African countries should just start sending people to Korea, to be honest with you, because Korea is definitely in need of a whole lot of people. But a fun fact is that Korea, Japan, India, China, all of these are very ethnically homogeneous countries. Okay, that's why these countries do not allow dual citizenship. Okay, so I'm a citizen of India right now, but if I want to take the citizenship of Canada, then I will have to give up the citizenship of India. Okay, so all these things really make a very big effect, because when your country is ethnically homogeneous, then it's very hard to replace the population when your population starts declining. Okay, so women aren't having enough children in South Korea to stabilize its population without migration. Look at this. Okay, so Korea cannot stabilize its population without migration, and there are very few people who really even want to migrate to South Korea. Okay, because the language is a very big hurdle, and the customs, traditions, many other things are just not that suitable for anybody that is not from that culture. Okay, South Korea has the lowest fertility rate in the world. The average South Korean woman has just 1.1 children, lower than any other country. For contrast, the global average is around 2.5 children. This rate has been declining steadily. Look at this. This rate has been declining steadily. Okay, between the early 1950s and today, the fertility rate in South Korea dropped from 5.6 to 1.1 children per woman, and it is going to keep on declining. So by 2030, if literally this rate just goes to zero point 0.5 children per woman, how do you think South Korea is even going to manage? Population is a very important thing. Okay, why is it so important? Because it drives economic growth, it drives many other things. Okay, if there are not enough people, if there are not enough consumers in South Korea or in any country, then all of your industries are going to suffer. Okay, banks will not have enough people to have as their customers. Then TV industries, like there are many South Korean companies, right? LG, Samsung, all of these companies will not have customers to buy their appliances. Okay, then when your family structure just completely deteriorates, then you will not have any sort of bond that will help the society to cohese together. Okay, so that's exactly what South Korea is going through right now, and to be honest, by 2030 it will be in the exact same position as Japan is right now. Okay, that's just my honest prediction. How does that affect the country's future population? Look at this. It's actually quite a population paradox for a rapidly aging society. That is because a key factor in population stabilization is what is called replacement rate. So replacement rate is 2.1 births per woman. Okay, many developed countries in the entire world are below this replacement rate. Okay, so they are not having 2.1 births per woman, and many countries in Africa and South Asia are above this replacement rate. So they are having every woman in these countries is having more children. Okay, now China is a very unique thing in this entire madness. Okay, China is a country that is going to grow old before it goes rich. I'll repeat this one more time. Okay, China is the country that is going to get old before it gets rich. This is a very important thing, right? China is rapidly aging at this point. Okay, just look at this graph, right? China has already is already below the replacement rate. So China is definitely going to lose almost 10 million people by 2030. Okay, that's just an honest prediction. Okay, So how does that affect? It's actually quite a population paradox for a rapidly aging society. That is because a key factor in population stabilization is what is called replacement rate, the point at which total number of children born per woman in the population exactly balances out the number of elder generation deaths. Okay, so replacement rate is just required to keep the population stable. You cannot even grow the population after that. Across the world, this number is 2.1, which means that fertility rates in South Korea do not reach the replacement level. In other words, women aren't having enough children in South Korea to stabilize its population without migration. Single in Sampo generation. So there's something called Sampo generation. Okay, look at this. A growing social phenomenon in South Korea, the Sampo generation, has seen women giving up three things. Women are giving up three things in the Sampo generation: relationships, marriage, and children. So they don't want to get romantically involved with anybody, they don't even want to marry, and they don't want to have children as well. South Korean women aren't simply choosing to have fewer children, some are opting to forego romantic relationships entirely. Okay, an increasing number are choosing never to marry at all, turning their backs on legal partnerships and even casual relationships in favor of having independent lives and careers in what can still be a sexist society despite economic advances. Very interesting article. Okay, look at this. And even casual relationships, they do not want to even have legal partnerships or even casual relationships in favor of having independent lives. I am not a very big fan of the so-called feminism that is being portrayed by the western media. Okay, and I'm a vocal critic of just vulture feminism. Okay, but in favor of having independent lives. Okay, and careers in what can still be a sexist society despite economic advances. So this is a very Asian thing, this is a very Eastern thing. Okay, so many of the Asian societies are still very very male dominated. Okay, but the women over there still want to have a like so-called independent lifestyle despite economic advances. Okay, so even though these societies have grown economically, these societies are still very very male dominated. Okay, so that's why women are not given that much amount of rights in most of these Asian countries, whether it's India, whether it's China, whether it's Korea, whether it's Japan, right? So that's what many of the women in South Korea are going through, and that is the reason why they don't even want to get romantically involved or get married or have children, right? Look at this. This is a very serious thing. Okay, I mean, you might think that what is so sacrosanct about a woman not being able to marry, but when majority of the women do that, right? Like say 60-70% of the women in society start doing that, then your society just stops functioning as a whole. Okay, your population starts declining like anything, and when your population starts declining, everything starts falling apart. Okay, that's why population is so important. Okay, the shift is part of a rising social phenomenon in South Korea, the Sampo generation. The word Sampo means to give up three things: relationships, marriage, and children. Statistics reflect dramatic shift in culture. Marriage rates among South Koreans of childbearing age, both men and women, have plummeted over the last 4 or 5 decades. In the 2015 census, fewer than a quarter, 23% of South Korean women aged 25 to 29 said they were married, down steeply from 90% in 1970. 90% of the South Korean women were married in 1970 between the age of 25 to 29. Okay, in the 2015 census, that percentage was just to 23%. Okay, look at this. It's almost like so much decline. And do you think this is going to grow even lesser, right? I mean, the trend just tells you that by 2030, literally, I will be surprised if even 15% of the women are getting married in South Korea at that time. So when people don't get married, if they don't start a family, then the society is not just going to progress. Okay, that's just the plain fact. That's just how the world works. Okay, today, South Koreans has one of the highest life expectancies in the world, 82 years. The global average is 72 years. Okay, so South Korea now has one of the highest life expectancies in the world, ranked 12th highest for 2015 to 2020, equal with Iceland. Okay, so South Korea is now a country where people are not dying, then new people are not getting born, and people are not having children, they are not getting married, and that's why the society is just in a perpetual decline. So by 2030, even if South Korea is able to maintain, I would say even 75 to 80% of its population, what it has right now, it would be a surprise. It would be a miracle. Okay, because the population decline has started in South Korea, and now it has, it's very very hard for countries to reverse the population decline. Okay, look at China. China started like a one child policy back in 1979. Okay, after that, now it has relaxed its policy, and now it is telling people that have two children, but people are not having two children. Okay, why is that? Because the child rearing is very expensive nowadays in China. Okay, that's why China is now facing a sort of demographic decline like no other country in the entire world. Okay, so it's a very important thing that when your society is rapidly aging and you do not have outside stimulus in terms of immigration, then your entire country is just going to collapse very soon. Okay, in later stages of the demographic transition, improvements in healthcare generally lead to a population with extended longevity. Okay, so when the demographic transition happens, improvements in healthcare, right, generally lead to a population with extended longevity. So people start living longer. The same thing is happening everywhere. I've also talked about this in the video about Australia. That is exactly what is happening in South Korea, where life expectancy has increased rapidly in the second half of 20th century amid industrialization. Okay, in the first half of the 1950s, life expectancy was just shorter than 42 years on average, 37 for men and 47 for women. Okay, women usually outlast men in almost all the countries and in almost all the generations. Okay, that's just how the world works. I don't know why that is, but that's just how it is. So 47 for women was the life expectancy in 1950 and 37 for men in 1950. Okay, because literally Korea was going through a Korean war at that time. Okay, young men were drafted into the military and they were dying on the battlefield. Okay, today the numbers look radically different. South Korea now has one of the highest life expectancies in the world, ranked 12th largest, equal with Iceland. The average baby born in South Korea can expect to live in the age of 82 years, specifically 79 for men and 85 for women. Just look at the numbers, okay? It's almost more than double. 79 for men and 85 for women are the life expectancies right now in South Korea. No wonder people are not dying, okay? In contrast, the global average is 72 years, nearly 70 for men and 74 for women. And the UN projects life expectancy will continue to improve by the end of this century. The average baby born in South Korea will live to the age of 92, 89 for men and 95 for women. Can you imagine anything more crazier than this? Look at this. UN projects life expectancy will continue to improve in South Korea. The life expectancy will continue to improve in South Korea. What does that mean? Like it's just such an insane thing to even understand that people are just not dying and no, new people are not getting born. Okay, by the end of this century, average baby born in South Korea will live to the age of 92 years by the end of this century. But to be honest with you, you know I doubt if anybody will even have any children by the end of this century, or a country like South Korea will even exist by that point, because these countries are facing a sort of existential crisis. Okay, Japan, South Korea, these are very these are at a very crucial crossroads in their entire country's history. Okay, even Russia, China, they are facing a sort of demographic transformation which is just insane. Nobody has seen something like this before. Okay, a separate study published in The Lancet showed that women in South Korea are projected to be the first in the world to have an average life expectancy above 90, with researchers predicting a 57% chance this will happen by 2030. Okay, so in South Korea by 2030, women will have a life expectancy of 90, which is the first in the entire world. Okay, imagine this. Why? Because they are not having children, they are not having any sort of romantic relationships, they are not having any sort of marriages with them, any, they're just living a very sober life with absolutely nothing exciting into it, and that's why they're just living until 90. They will start living until 90 by 2030. What do you think is going to happen to the economy of South Korea at that point? If you do not allow outside people to come into South Korea at that point, my honest prediction is that your entire economy is just going to collapse. Okay, so South Korea is a very small country. Okay, entire economy of South Korea is based on very small clusters of government backed companies. Okay, so there is Samsung, there is LG, right? So there are very few of these companies that literally own the entire country of South Korea. Okay, imagine this. And the entire country of South Korea also depends upon trade, right? So I'll not be surprised if many of you are seeing this video on a Samsung phone, right? Samsung is a South Korean conglomerate. Okay, it's a hugely a humongous country. Okay, humongous company. Okay, so that's why South Korea is entirely based on trade. If it stops trading with other countries, then the entire South Korean economy will just come to a standstill. Okay, imagine this. So now the changing population. This is the population pyramid of South Korea. Okay, with low birth rates, fewer marriages, and longer lives, the South Korean population is actually aging faster than any other developed country. Okay, In 1950, less than 3% of the population was aged 65 and over. Today, that number is at 15%. By the mid 2060s, the UN forecasts the percentage of those older than 65 will peak at more than 40%. The numbers paint a picture of very aged society, super aged society. Okay, what happens to a society when the number of old people outnumber the number of young people? Okay, so the people who are above 65, their number is more than the people who are below 18 or below 15, right? Just forget that I'm talking about a country. Just try to have this kind of scenario on any sort of society, and you will understand that that society is not going in the right direction, no matter what, right? When you have more older people and less younger people, surely you are not destined for success. Okay, and with low birth rates, fewer marriages, and longer lives, the trends combine to create a South Korean population that is actually aging faster than any other developed country. A population with longer lifespans means there are more older people around, and women having fewer children means there aren't enough young people to replace them when they die. True. Eventually, this paradox means that South Korea's population will begin to decline. The UN predicts South Korea's population will peak in around 2024. UN predicts South Korea's population will peak in around 2024 and then start to fall. Population in South Korea will peak at 2024 and then it will start falling. And when the population of any country starts declining, it is very hard to reverse that trend. Okay, because you can only reverse that trend by immigration. And when you're dealing with a country like South Korea, which is very very homogeneous, ethnically homogeneous, it's just impossible to reverse that trend. Okay, the UN predicts South Korean population will peak in around 2024 and then start to fall. By 2100, the UN forecasts South Korea's population will be only around 29 million, the same as it was in 1966. I will stop here for a moment, okay? Just let that sink in for a moment. By 2100, by the end of this century, the UN forecasts South Korea's population will be only around 29 million. This is the data from the United Nations. 29 million, the same as it was in 1966. So South Korea population decline will be so rapid that by 2100 there will be only 29 million people living in South Korea, which was the exact same number as in 1966. This is a very crucial and important thing. Okay, so that's why I think South Korea is really headed for a very a rough ride by 2030. And that's why most of the many industrialized countries in the entire world are facing this exact same kind of scenario. I will discuss all the countries and where I see all of them standing by 2030. Okay, so even the GDP of South Korea is supposed to decline, right, drastically. So you understand why population is so important, is that demography affects everything. Okay, everything, like literally your GDP is affected by it, your living standard is affected by it, because when does the government get money, right? It gets money by the taxes that you pay, the income tax that people pay when people buy things. All of this is based on consumer demand. Okay, consumer demand is just about supply and demand. Okay, so if you do not have the consumers in your country, then definitely your economy is going to suffer. Okay, so South Korea will just have to keep on exporting more and more products to outside countries, yes, so that it can feed people in its own country. But in today's world, I've made a video about this where I say that new world order after coronavirus, where I discuss that many countries have started looking inward now. Okay, after coronavirus pandemic, many countries are not going to be in a very good position to trade with other countries. So that's why if you look at the situation of Canada and America at this point, okay, so Canada, America stopped many shipments from coming to Canada. There were the mask shipments that were coming to Canada. There were ventilator shipments that were coming to Canada, and both of them were blocked. Okay, and Canada and America are friendly countries, the so-called friendly countries. Okay, but even in this kind of scenario, countries are not helping each other. Okay, so when all hell starts breaking loose, every country is just going to look after itself. So that's why South Korea is in a very precarious situation. So by 2030, it will not have enough people to feed into its own country to sustain its own economy. That's why its GDP will decline. Okay, there are not many people being born. The people who are already existing are not dying. People are not getting married. They are not having children. Women are just living independent lifestyles. This is the recipe for disaster. Okay, let me be brutally honest with you. South Korea is headed for a disaster by 2030, and it is just in the making right now. So I'll stop talking here. If you like my analysis of this article, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, as I upload these kind of geopolitical news on a daily basis. And this kind of series I'm doing just for the for you guys, because I really want you to understand what we're heading to on the world stage. Okay, and no other YouTube channel is doing something like this. Okay, this is the only YouTube channel that is doing a series about the world in 2030 and doing a detailed analysis of all the G20 countries. Okay, so I will upload videos about all the G20 countries in the coming days, so don't forget to subscribe and check back in daily for new videos. Thank you, have a good day, bye bye.